He used to text me only after midnight. That should have been my first clue. When the world was asleep and his friends had all gone home, he'd call me over like I was some kind of dirty secret. And back then, I didn't care. I was 21, barely out of college, new to the city, and completely smitten with Luke Turner. He was everything I thought I wanted, tall, magnetic, with a sharp grin and eyes that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I met him at a charity gala I was waitressing at. He asked for champagne. I gave him a smile. The next day, he tracked me down on Instagram. 2 days later, I was having dinner with him in a penthouse I never thought I'd see twice. He made me feel special, behind closed doors. But in public, I was always just a shadow. He'd turn away when his friends showed up at the restaurant. He'd cancel plans last minute and say things like, "It's complicated with my family," or, "You wouldn't get it." "It's not about you." I told myself he was just scared of what they'd say. That his wealthy, high society family wouldn't understand. That one day, he'd introduce me properly and everything would make sense. I held on to that hope longer than I should have. And then came the party. His family's annual summer bash, invite-only, mansion on the hill kind of affair. I wasn't invited, of course. But I showed up anyway, dressed like I belonged, walking through the crowd like I wasn't shaking inside. I found him near the pool, surrounded by friends and girls in designer dresses. And I heard it. Luke laughing, a glass of whiskey in his hand, saying, "Come on, she's just a fling. Fun for now. You really think I'd bring her here?" I froze. That single sentence split me wide open. I don't remember how I got home. Just the ache in my chest and the way his words kept echoing. Just a fling. The next morning, I blocked his number. I quit my job. I packed my bags and disappeared from the city without telling anyone. I didn't cry. Not after that night. Instead, I turned everything off. I went dark. But the thing about being underestimated, about being cast aside like you're disposable, is that it lights a fire. I was broke, humiliated, and invisible. But I wasn't done. I found a job in a small finance firm out west. Nothing glamorous. Just spreadsheets and late nights and bitter coffee. But I worked like I had something to prove. And I did. For 6 months, I barely left my apartment. I studied markets, read case studies, chased leads no one else wanted. One night, I took a gamble on a tech investment everyone else called a waste of time. It paid off. My commission changed everything. And that's when he called. Not Luke, Daniel. Luke's older brother. The one who'd quietly built his own empire while the rest of the family showed off at fundraisers. He introduced himself through a mutual client. Said he liked how I handled risk. Asked if I'd be open to consulting on a few projects. I said yes. I didn't know then that he already knew who I was. That he remembered the girl his brother once bragged about dismissing. But he never brought it up. Not once. Instead, he gave me trust, resources, and space to prove myself. Under his mentorship, I grew. I made investments that tripled returns. I was no longer the girl waiting for texts at midnight. I was the woman building her own name. And 2 years later, when Daniel turned to me over dinner and said, "I'd like you to meet my family," I didn't flinch. I said, "Let's do it." Because I already knew exactly who would be sitting across the table. Luke Turner. My secret heartbreak. The man who laughed when he thought I wasn't listening. I wasn't walking into a trap. I was walking into the beginning of something bigger. And this time, I wouldn't be the secret. I'd be the headline. The dinner was at the Turner family estate. Same place as that summer party, the mansion with the marble staircases, glass chandeliers, and enough staff to run a hotel. This time, I arrived in the front seat of Daniel's black town car. The valet opened the door for me like I belonged there. Daniel held my hand like I wasn't a secret. I wore a dress that cost more than my old monthly rent and heels I'd chosen specifically because they clicked loud enough to announce every step. Inside, the Turners were exactly as I remembered. Polished, wealthy, and pretending not to be judgmental. His mother, Regina, gave me a once-over and a tight smile. His father, Charles, just nodded from the head of the table, already deep into a glass of wine. Luke was the last to walk in. Late, as usual. Still charming, still handsome in that careless way that used to undo me. His step slowed when he saw me. For a moment, he didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just stood there, staring at me like he was looking at a ghost. Daniel stood and clapped him on the back. "You're late," he said casually. "I want you to meet someone." I turned to face Luke fully. "We've met," I said. My voice didn't shake. Luke swallowed hard. His eyes flicked down to my hand. Daniel's hand was on mine. The diamond on my ring finger sparkled beneath the chandelier. "We're engaged," Daniel announced. "I wanted you all to meet her properly." Regina's lips parted. Charles finally looked up from his wine. Luke said nothing. The silence was its own kind of music. I smiled at all of them. "Thank you for having me." I'd rehearsed that line for weeks. Dinner went on. Regina asked me stiff questions about my background. I answered politely. Daniel bragged about my career wins. Charles made an offhand comment about how the market was full of noise these days. Luke barely touched his food. He stared, quietly, through most of it. At one point, he dropped his fork. I didn't even flinch. After dessert, Daniel took a call outside. That's when Luke cornered me by the bar. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Enjoying the family hospitality," I said smoothly. "You're marrying Daniel?" "Looks that way." His jaw clenched. "You're doing this to get back at me." I laughed, quiet and controlled. "Don't flatter yourself. Not everything is about you. It used to be. That was before I learned what you really thought of me." His voice lowered. "That wasn't fair. I didn't mean. You said I was just a fling. You said I wasn't the kind of girl you bring home." I stepped closer, not backing down. "Well, here I am. At your family's table. Wearing your brother's ring. Does he know?" Luke whispered. "Yes," I said, holding his gaze. "He knows everything." It wasn't a lie. Daniel did know. I'd told him months ago. He didn't flinch. He just asked me one question: "Do you still care about him?" And I'd answered honestly. Only in the way someone remembers a fire that once burned them. Daniel respected that. Luke, on the other hand, looked like he'd just been slapped. "You can't love him." "Maybe not yet," I said. "But love isn't just about chemistry. It's about respect. Stability. Honesty." I let the words sink in. "All the things you never gave me." Luke stepped back like I'd drawn blood. Good. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one bleeding. I was the one holding the knife. Daniel returned and wrapped an arm around my waist. "Everything okay?" he asked. I smiled up at him. "Perfect." That night, as we drove home, I looked out the window and saw Luke's reflection in the glass, still standing by the bar, frozen. Watching the girl he once threw away slip out of his life again. But this time I was leaving with more than memories. I was leaving with his last chance. And he knew it. The engagement made the papers the next morning. Not a full feature, just a polished column in the society section of a popular business daily. Turner Holdings heir announces engagement to rising investor Elise Grace. I'd kept my last name. It wasn't about pride. It was about proof that I hadn't needed theirs to rise. That I was never just an accessory. I sipped my coffee as I read the article in Daniel's penthouse kitchen. He kissed the top of my head and said, "They got your good side." My phone buzzed nonstop that day. Old coworkers who'd ignored me suddenly remembered my name. A girl I used to share an apartment with messaged me a string of emojis. But one message stood out. It wasn't from Luke directly. It was from his assistant, Olivia. We'd met once, briefly. She was sharp, efficient, and probably knew more secrets than anyone else in the Turner house. Her message read, "He wants to meet. Said it's important." I didn't reply. Not because I wasn't tempted. But because I'd already learned what happens when you give Luke Turner your attention. He uses it until he's done. But this time I was the one in control. Still, I didn't tell Daniel about the message. Not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't want Luke's desperation to taint what Daniel and I were building. Real or not, it was solid. Stable. And I respected that. But I couldn't stop thinking about that night by the bar. The way Luke had looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. And maybe he was. Because the girl he'd known, the one who smiled too much and waited for his attention like it was oxygen, was gone. She died the night of that party. What rose from the ashes was someone he didn't recognize. And he hated that. Days passed. We met Daniel's friends for drinks. I toured charity sites for the foundation his family wanted me to co-chair. I was photographed at events I used to sneak into. And everywhere I went, Luke was there. Lingering at the edge of the room. Watching. Never quite close enough to cause a scene, but always near enough that I could feel the heat of his attention. One night, at a formal dinner hosted by a rival firm, Daniel and I sat at a candlelit table with 10 other guests. One of them was Luke. The name card said so. He arrived late, again, and the tension snapped the moment he sat across from us. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said smoothly. "You're everywhere these days." I smiled over the rim of my glass. "I have a good publicist." Daniel chuckled and took my hand under the table. "She's modest. Her work's been making waves even without my last name attached." Luke's jaw ticked. "Funny. You always said you didn't want to be in the spotlight." "Funny how fast people change when they realize they deserve it," I replied. That shut him up. The table conversation moved on, but I felt Luke's eyes on me all night. After dessert, I stepped away to freshen up. When I returned, Luke was waiting by the hallway. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said. "Is that what this is?" I replied. "A game? Because it feels more like finally stepping into the light." He moved closer. "You're marrying Daniel just to get to me." "That's where you're wrong." I looked him dead in the eye. "You're not even the point anymore." He laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe you don't feel anything?" I hesitated. And maybe that was the mistake. Because for one second, I let the past flicker in my eyes. The nights he held me. The mornings he whispered my name like it meant something. But I snapped out of it. "I feel relief," I said. "Relief that I escaped you before you broke me beyond repair." He stepped back like I'd slapped him. "You think he's better than me?" "He is better than you," I said. "Not because of money or power. But because he sees me. He never made me feel small." "I didn't mean to." "But you did." The silence stretched. "You should leave," I said. "This isn't your spotlight anymore." When I walked back into the ballroom, Daniel met me halfway. "Everything okay?" he asked. I smiled. "Perfect." Later that night, I lay in bed beside him, wide awake. The ring on my finger sparkled faintly in the dark. I thought about how far I'd come. From hidden lover to the woman the whole city was watching. From waiting on a man's texts to making headlines. And I wasn't done yet. Because weddings are more than declarations of love. Sometimes, they're declarations of war. And this one? This one would be unforgettable. The dress fitting was at one of the most exclusive bridal ateliers in the city. The kind of place where gowns weren't displayed, they were whispered about. Daniel booked the entire floor for me. When I arrived, the receptionist knew my name. A stylist greeted me with a tray of sparkling water and champagne. For the next hour, I stood on raised platforms while seamstresses bustled around me, pinning satin and lace like I was royalty. I wasn't used to being the center of attention like this. But I didn't flinch. I'd worked for this version of me, the woman who got fittings in glass-walled studios instead of scouring department store clearance racks. As I studied myself in the mirror, something shifted. I didn't look like a girl chasing closure anymore. I looked like someone worth chasing. Halfway through the second fitting, the door opened. I expected Daniel. Instead, it was Luke. No invitation. No warning. He stood frozen, eyes sweeping over me in the gown. The seamstresses exchanged nervous glances. I stepped down slowly, smoothing the fabric. "You're not supposed to be here," I said. "I needed to see you," he said, voice tight. "In a wedding dress?" "In anything." He looked like he hadn't slept. His shirt was rumpled, his collar undone. "You're really going through with it?" I said yes, didn't I? "He's not the one," Luke said. "He doesn't know you like I do." "He knows enough not to treat me like a dirty secret," I said calmly. "That's a start." "You don't love him." "Maybe. Maybe not. But he loves me the right way." I turned back to the mirror. "And sometimes, that's all that matters." Luke moved closer. "I made a mistake. You have to know that." "You made a choice," I corrected. "You laughed about me. You denied me. You didn't just hurt me, Luke. You erased me. And now you expect what, gratitude? Forgiveness? Another chance?" His mouth opened, then closed. "I never forgot you." "That's your burden," I said. "Not mine." He looked at the dress again. "I always pictured you in white. But not like this." I smiled coldly. "That's the thing about pictures. You can't control the frame anymore." He didn't follow me when I walked away. The next week was a blur of appointments. Cakes. Flowers. Menus. Seating charts. Every time I chose something, I knew Luke would have to sit through it. Because he was best man. Daniel insisted, he said it was family tradition. I didn't argue. I wanted Luke to see every detail. The flowers I picked. The playlist I approved. The vows I rehearsed. I wanted him to know that every step I took toward the altar was a step away from the version of me who once waited for him to choose me. He had already made his choice. I was making mine. At the rehearsal dinner, he sat across from me. Silent. Seething. I wore a silk slip dress and a smile. Daniel kissed my cheek and toasted to our future. Luke barely lifted his glass. Later, in the hallway outside the banquet room, he cornered me again. "You're punishing me," he said. "Is that what you think this is?" I asked. "You think I'd marry a man just to teach you a lesson? Wouldn't be the first time someone used my brother to make a point." I stepped closer. "You know what hurts the most?" I asked. "It's not that you didn't love me. It's that you did, and still chose to hide it." He said nothing. I nodded. "That's why I'll never take you back. Because you didn't lose me by accident. You threw me away." I walked back into the room without looking back. The rest of the night passed in a blur. But just before we left, Luke said something I never expected. "If you walk down that aisle," he said quietly, "I'll never forgive myself." I paused in the doorway. "Good," I said. "Neither will I." I didn't say it out of cruelty. I said it because I meant it. Because for the first time in years, his guilt wasn't my responsibility. And the next time he saw me in white, it would be too late. The wedding invitations went out the next morning. Cream envelopes embossed with gold foil, each one sealed with the Turner family crest and mailed by hand. Daniel spared no expense. His mother personally reviewed the guest list. His father reserved an entire country estate for the weekend. I was measured for 2 gowns, one for the ceremony, one for the reception. There were meetings with photographers, stylists, musicians, planners. People smiled at me like I was a princess. And I smiled back like I wasn't keeping a secret. Because I hadn't told Daniel that Luke had shown up at the fitting. I hadn't told him about the hallway confrontation, the guilt-drenched pleas, or the final whisper of regret. Not because I wanted to protect Luke, but because I didn't want him to matter. If I said it aloud, it would turn the memory into something real. I wanted it to stay small. Insignificant. Like the flicker of a match I had no intention of lighting again. But Luke made it hard to forget. He hovered around every event leading up to the wedding. At the tasting, he pushed food around his plate and stared at my hand. At the family brunch, he lingered near my chair and tried to make me laugh like old times. I didn't bite. The more he tried, the more obvious it became, Luke Turner was unraveling. The man who once laughed about me to his friends was now falling apart in slow motion. He couldn't stand watching me be chosen by someone who didn't hesitate. At the final walkthrough of the venue, he followed me out to the garden. I was on the phone with the florist when he appeared behind me, hands in his pockets. "You look happy," he said. "I am. Even with him?" "Especially with him." "I don't believe you." "That's the difference between you and Daniel," I said. "He doesn't need to believe I'm his first. He just believes I'm his future." Luke flinched. "Why didn't you tell me you were serious about him?" "Because you would have tried to stop it." "You're damn right I would have," he said. "You think I can just sit back and watch you marry my brother?" "You already did worse," I said coldly. "You watched me fall in love with you and never said a word. You watched me disappear and never came looking. You only care now because someone else finally saw what you ignored." "I didn't ignore you." "You denied me," I snapped. "You humiliated me. And now you want redemption just because it's convenient." He stepped closer. "I never stopped thinking about you. And I never stopped wishing I hadn't met you," I whispered. "But here we are." There was a long pause. Then he said something that stopped me cold. "I told Daniel about us." My breath caught. "When?" "2 nights ago. He deserved to know." "And?" "He said it didn't change anything," Luke said bitterly. "Said he knew you were with someone before. That it didn't scare him. That he trusted you." My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. "Because he's not afraid of my past," I said. "He's only interested in my present." Luke looked down. "He said he loves you. That you're the best thing that ever happened to him." I nodded once. "He's right. But I saw you first," Luke said quietly. "Then maybe next time, don't look away." I turned and walked back into the venue. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps. No apology. Just silence. That night, Daniel pulled me into his arms before bed. My brother's a fool, he said. I'm just lucky you didn't let him ruin you. I rested my head on his chest. He tried, I murmured. But some things survive the fire. I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about Luke's face. The regret. The way his voice broke when he admitted what he'd done. But it didn't matter anymore. He could scream his apologies from the rooftops. He could cry at the altar if he wanted. But in 3 days, I'd walk down that aisle. And when I did, I'd walk right past him. The brother who threw me away. And into the arms of the one who never hesitated to choose me. The morning of the wedding came with rain. Light at first, like a whisper on the windows of the bridal suite. The planner panicked. The backup plan was activated. The ceremony would move indoors to the estate's grand ballroom, beneath a vaulted ceiling dripping with crystal chandeliers. I didn't flinch. Rain didn't scare me. I'd walked through worse. The makeup artist arrived first. Then the hair team. Then the photographer, snapping behind-the-scenes shots for the inevitable society coverage. I smiled for the camera, but I wasn't thinking about press. I was thinking about how far I'd come. The last time I stood in this house, I was invisible. Now I was the main event. People waited on me. Guests gossiped about me. Daniel's parents fussed over my seating preferences. And Luke? He was the best man, but he wasn't acting like one. According to Olivia, who still sent me quiet updates, he hadn't slept in 2 nights. He'd asked twice if the ceremony could be delayed. No one listened. At exactly 3 o'clock, the music began. The guests were seated. The aisle was cleared. I stepped into my dress, an ivory silk sheath with a low back and a train that moved like water. My hair was swept into a soft knot, my veil anchored by the diamond comb Daniel's mother had gifted me. The doors opened. Gasps echoed through the hall. I took the first step. Then the second. I saw Daniel at the altar, steady and waiting. I saw Luke beside him, pale and still. His eyes locked on mine like he was trying to speak through them. But I didn't stop. I walked. Slowly. Deliberately. Every step was a sentence. Every breath was a paragraph. I passed Luke without a glance. He turned slightly, as if to reach for me. But Daniel stepped forward first. And I reached for him. The ceremony began. Vows were spoken. Promises made. But right before the final line, right before the officiant could say the words, Luke interrupted. Wait. A hush fell. Daniel turned. I turned. The room froze. I can't let this happen, Luke said. Not without telling the truth. Daniel looked calm. Too calm. You already did that, little brother. You don't understand. I understand enough, Daniel said. I understand that you had her first. That you didn't respect her. That you called her a fling. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Luke's face went crimson. She's not just anything, he said. She's everything. And yet you only realized it when I put a ring on her finger, Daniel said coolly. You don't get to ruin this. I love her, Luke said, almost pleading now. I always have. The room was silent. I took a breath. You don't love me, I said. You love the memory of control. You love that I waited. That I stayed quiet. That I let you choose when I was seen. That's not love, Luke. That's ownership. He looked like I'd struck him. You don't mean that. I do. And if you'd ever really loved me, you would have said it when it mattered. Not now. Not here. I turned to Daniel. I'm ready. The officiant cleared his throat and resumed. This time, there were no interruptions. When Daniel said I do, he meant it with his whole chest. When I said it back, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about peace. About being chosen. About building a life with someone who saw all of me and didn't flinch. We kissed. The crowd clapped. Luke stood still, shoulders slumped, like a man who'd lost a war he never knew he was fighting until it was already over. I didn't look back. Not because I wanted to hurt him. But because I finally didn't need to. That was the difference. That was the power. I walked out of that ballroom not just as a bride, but as someone who had taken the pain, the silence, the erasure, and turned it into something beautiful. Into a life that wasn't reaction but intention. And Luke would have to live with that. Every holiday. Every family gathering. Every time he looked at me sitting beside his brother. He would have to remember that I was the girl he laughed about. And I became the woman who laughed last. The wedding reception was held in the glass conservatory at the far end of the estate. By the time we arrived, the rain had stopped and the sky was a soft watercolor blend of gold and ash blue. The lights inside shimmered against the wet windows. Guests mingled with champagne and whispered about the scene in the ballroom. But Daniel and I? We didn't acknowledge it. We smiled, danced, cut the cake, and took photos like nothing had happened. Because nothing had. Not really. Luke's words didn't change the outcome. He tried to turn the wedding into a battlefield, but I didn't come here to fight. I came to win. And I already had. As Daniel led me into our first dance, I saw Luke standing off to the side. Still in his tuxedo. Still holding the glass he hadn't sipped from. His tie was loose now, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion and something like grief. And I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel pity either. I just felt done. Daniel leaned close and whispered, "Do you want me to have him removed?" I shook my head. Let him stay. Let him watch. And watch he did. As I danced with Daniel, as I hugged his parents, as I laughed with old friends and took pictures beneath flower arches. He watched me be the bride. Watched me be loved. Watched me become the centerpiece of a celebration he never believed I could be part of. And that was enough. I didn't need to twist the knife. I just had to show him what it meant to be on the outside. At one point in the evening, Daniel's cousin pulled me aside. "I remember you," she said. "You were the girl Luke used to sneak out to see. You always looked so heartbroken when he left early." I held her gaze. "That was a long time ago." She smiled. "You're not the same girl." "No," I said. I buried her. When the music slowed and people filtered out to the garden for cigars and fresh air, Luke approached me one last time. "Can I talk to you alone?" he asked. I didn't respond right away. But eventually, I nodded. We stepped out into the side courtyard, where lanterns glowed and rain still clung to the leaves. He stood silently for a moment, as if gathering courage. "You didn't even look at me when you walked down the aisle," he said. "Because I wasn't walking toward you. You didn't give me a chance to explain." "You had years to explain," I said. "You had every opportunity to say something. And the first time you said the word love to me, it was in front of 100 people, during someone else's vows. Do you know what that tells me?" He said nothing. "It tells me you still think everything is about you." He ran a hand through his hair. "I was a coward. I know that. And now you have to live with it," I said. "Every time you see me at a family event. Every time Daniel kisses my hand or holds my waist. You'll remember that you had me first, and you lost me first." His face twisted. "Do you love him?" I didn't blink. "Yes. More than you loved me?" I took a deep breath. I don't measure love that way anymore. With you, I loved like I was drowning. With him, I breathe. He turned away, shoulders tense, jaw clenched. I thought I'd have more time." "You had all the time in the world," I said softly. "And you spent it pretending I didn't matter." He looked back at me. "You matter now." I shook my head. Too late. I walked away. Back into the reception. Back into the warmth and light and future I'd built. Daniel saw me coming and opened his arms. "Everything okay?" he asked. I nodded and slid into his embrace. "Perfect." Luke didn't stay much longer. He left before the final toasts. Before the sparkler send-off. Before the car with white ribbons carried us away from the estate. I watched him from the window as we drove off. Standing alone beneath the same canopy where he once called me a fling. But now, I was family. And he was just a man with a memory he couldn't undo. We returned from our honeymoon a week later. Italy, the Amalfi Coast, private villas, and sea air. Daniel kept his promise, no phones, no emails, just us. I wore sundresses and laughter like armor. I didn't think about Luke. Not really. Occasionally, in the quiet of a morning or the lull between dinners, he'd flicker across my mind. But I let the thought pass like a wave. Because I wasn't on a mission anymore. I was living a life he'd never have access to. When we arrived back in the city, Turner Holdings hosted a welcome-back reception. All eyes were on me as I stepped into the boardroom in a tailored white pantsuit and nude heels. The same office where I once delivered coffee now bore my name on a silver plaque beside Daniel's. Co-chair. Partner. Turner Grace Ventures. Luke was there, of course. He hadn't missed a single meeting since the wedding. He showed up, sat quietly, and avoided my eyes. He looked thinner. Quieter. Not broken, but emptied. That day, he stood when I entered. Not out of habit, but out of something heavier, respect, maybe. Or shame. I nodded once, polite. Unbothered. I wasn't cruel. I just didn't owe him softness. After the meeting, Olivia approached me. He's been different, she said. Since the wedding. Quiet. Focused. Like he's trying to disappear inside the work. I nodded. Let him. That afternoon, Daniel and I were scheduled to visit a charity center we'd funded together, a girls' education initiative. Cameras followed us through the halls. Girls waved, smiling shyly. I gave a short speech about second chances, about rising from dismissal and shame, about becoming who you were always meant to be, even when the world tried to convince you otherwise. That night, the Foundation's official page posted a quote from me beneath a photo. They said I wasn't the kind of woman men marry. So I became the kind of woman who chooses which man she'll let walk beside her. It went viral within hours. People reposted it. Commented. Debated. But Luke didn't say a word. At the next family gathering, he brought a date. She was beautiful. Tall, sleek, polite. A calculated choice. She clung to him like a lifeline. I watched from across the table as he laughed too hard, drank too much, and never looked my way. And for the first time, I didn't care. He could build a future. He could fall in love again. Or not. It didn't matter. Because I wasn't the girl waiting to be claimed. I was the woman who built her own crown and chose who deserved to stand under it. At a gala 6 months later, an interviewer asked me off record, "Do you have any regrets?" I looked at Daniel, whose hand rested gently at the small of my back. I looked at the glittering skyline. And I thought of Luke, somewhere across the ballroom, watching but never approaching. Only that I didn't leave sooner, I said. Because the truth is, revenge is sweet. But peace is richer. Power is quieter. And being loved out loud by someone who never asked me to shrink? That was the real win. I wasn't just his brother's bride. I was the woman he would never forget. And the woman I'd become, strong, visible, desired, was someone he'd never have again. Not in this life. Maybe not even the next.